Hi, everybody, and welcome back to session 6 for following the Bible study, The Purpose. Great to see you back. I would like to start today by saying that what we've been studying is nothing new. It is echoing Paul's teaching. And probably you're going to look at me and go, wait a minute, I've been hearing a lot of different stuff that what I'm used to hearing. How can you tell me it's echoing Paul's teaching? It is. So let's kind of delve into that a little bit. Who is Paul? Well, Paul in Galatians 1 and in Philippians 3 talks about himself saying, I am a Hebrew of Hebrews, a zealot follower of the Bible, a teacher of the law. I'm a Pharisee. That's what Paul says. So we do know that from Acts chapter 6 that he was present at the stoning of Stephen. We also know that he was chasing Jews that believed that Jesus was the Messiah on his way to Damascus to what? To bring them back for what? To probably be killed because of their blasphemy, believing that Jesus is God or the Son of God, and that he is the Messiah. That was in his teaching. He's knowledgeable. He studied the Bible and he believed strongly that Jesus is like a false prophet, that people have to be killed for following him. So what we do know in Acts 9, that he was on his road to Damascus, he loses his sight, he sees Jesus first, loses his sight, in 3 days regains his sight, and in Acts 9 it says, he started to preach the gospel immediately. Isn't that like a little bit strange, like after how he believed? Also in Galatians 1, he says that I never took anybody or apostle to teach me anything new. I just told you because it was revealed to me by God, right? So do you think the revelation was because of his level of study of the Bible, that he knew everything in and out of the Bible? So once he realized that Jesus is the Messiah, then he started all of a sudden realizing, like, the Old Testament has prophecies about the Messiah as the king that frees Israel. So they have the picture of this Israel becoming a strong country and everybody else bows to them because of the Messiah. And then all of a sudden, I believe, Paul goes, it's not the freedom as in a big kingdom, as a big country, and we're in charge of everybody else as Israelites. It's the inner freedom is saved by grace. The law does not matter. So all of a sudden he goes from persecuting and killing the Jews that following Jesus to preaching the gospel. So what is the gospel? What does that mean, preaching the gospel? Sometimes when we think about it, we think of the New Testament as we have it today. There was no New Testament at that time. Hopefully we'll all agree to that. So what he was referring to, the word means good news. So every time you read gospel, just please think of it, good news. What's the good news? The good news is Jesus is the Messiah. So what's the big deal about that, right? Well, because Jesus affords us freedom through grace. The law had ways, when you sin, you do this, and you're good with God. So Jesus' sacrifice on the cross and his resurrection, proving that he is God, affords us not to have to follow the law. But what did the law do? You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Are we trapped in a similar law in our present time? Like, what is sin, as we've spoken about? What types of sin, big sin, small sin, salvation, is it a one-time deal or is it not? Am I accountable for the sin if I didn't know if it was a sin or not? If I get angry enough, is that a sin? Greed, like how much greed is okay, then it becomes a sin. We get caught up in all these kind of questions that we don't know what to do with. That's the law that we're trapped in. So that's what we're echoing what Paul was teaching. Saved by grace and not by works. Paul adds something very beautiful in Galatians 2 and 3, not just works that we know, as in good deeds or giving or things like that. He goes, don't be trapped in the works of the law. What does that mean? It means don't feel justified because you're following the things that you think are good things, like what the Bible, following the Bible. He was following the Bible left and right. But get away from thinking what's right and what's wrong. For example, at the time he was, in Galatians, one of the letters that he wrote, he was saying what? Circumcision? Who needs circumcision? It's okay not to be circumcised. I need you to understand, if I come to you today and say, who needs baptism? You don't need to be baptized to be a Christian. There'll be a furor. People will go nuts. Like, what do you mean? Baptism is one of the main things to do to show that you're a Christian. Well, at the time, for thousands of years prior to that, the covenant between God and the Israelites were sealed by the covenant of circumcision. To prove that you're following me, you need to circumcise your firstborn male. You need to circumcise your male children. So to Paul to come at that time and say it's not important, he's demonstrating it's not that it doesn't matter. That's what he was saying. It doesn't matter if you're circumcised or not. Forget about that. You must be this to be that. You must not eat with your left hand, or you must wash your right leg before you enter. All these things don't matter. They don't matter. So what is the biggest thing that he promoted? In all his letters, Paul spoke about grace. Sometimes I believe we handle grace. It's the same word we use when I buy a car and they tell me you don't have to make your first payment until a year later. That's grace, right? It's a grace period. Sometimes we take our salvation, as we've talked about, and the grace from that salvation, and we believe we have a grace period during our life on earth, and when we die, we're going to say we know Jesus, therefore his grace washing all of our sin gets us into heaven. So it's not being experienced on a daily level, which is what we're trying to promote here, is like, if that's the biggest gift that Jesus has given us, that God has afforded us, how can we not be using it on a daily basis? We've discussed in previous lessons, it's through our acknowledging of our sins that we can experience grace daily. That's the shower that's going to clean you up. So you may say, Rana, you want me to dwell into my sin every day? No. We're not saying dwell in the sin. We're saying dwell in the forgiveness of sin through grace that cleanses you. How do I do that? Well, through humbling myself to accept and acknowledge my daily sin. Not just forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned. I know I have sinned, but which sins have I committed? Did I make my colleague at work angry by saying something? Did I hide something from my wife that's going to make her upset at me later? Did I lie to somebody? Well, it's a white lie. Go to God with those sins and be happy that God is forgiving you and washing you off of them. That is the experience of grace. First thing is know your sin that you're doing on a daily basis. The second biggest thing is to fight hard not to get the guilt and shame that accompanies the admission of sin. Sometimes we know if I'm not doing it right, then I must be doing it wrong. That's not what it's about. It doesn't matter. It's the recognition of sin and not making it make you feel guilty. Look at Paul. Did you know, is there any record in the Bible that he spent days and months and years asking for God's forgiveness for everything that he has done in the past? Or like in Acts 9, just like that. That's what the Bible is about. You know the Bible already. He uses it to accept God's grace on him. In Philippians 3, 30 years into his ministry, just a very short time before he's knows he's going to die, he writes like, I am not there yet. Forget what's behind you. Just press forwards. It is, I like to use the example, it's attributed to Socrates, but I believe it summarizes Christianity in a wonderful way, or at least the side that we're trying to talk about and teach in this series. Socrates says everybody should live their lives as if they're walking in a tunnel, and there is a bright light at the end of the tunnel, knowing full well that you will never reach the end of the tunnel, the light. you have to strive very hard to try and reach that light. If that doesn't sum up the Bible and what we need to do, I don't know what summarizes it. So let's not hang up on the things that we disagree upon. Let's acknowledge our sin, combat feeling guilty. Let the joy of daily grace fill our lives. We will reflect it to people, not to appease them, not to make them happy, but for them to wow, these are happy, wonderful, fulfilled individuals, them Christians. How do I become like them? How can I experience this daily grace and feel wonderful? So a few things to remember. The gospel is the good news. Every time you read it, it's good news. What is the good news? That Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is God. He came and showed himself as Jesus, the Son of God on earth. And why is that important? Because he is the Messiah. His death and resurrection affords us the grace that frees us. Frees us from what? From the works of the law. No reason to be hung up on anything. And the main thing is to experience God's grace daily. I hope this all makes sense. I'll see you guys next time and have a great day.